Hello, and welcome to Futra's The League of Legends LP. This is the episode describing the characters on the different teams in Tuesday Episode 2, Jungle Jarvan. First off on our team we have Kennen. Kennen is generally played as an AP carry in the top or mid. Remember, AP carry is a character who relies on abilities to deal damage and scales off of ability power with statistics. Sometimes in sort of a gimmicky way, where it's very strong early game because of his abilities, but falls off a little bit later game. He can be run as an attack damage carry, an AD carry, which basically relies on his W ability, which every once in a while, every like third or fourth attack will give you extra auto attack damage. So it's not that strong because most of his kit does not scale with AD, but it can be decent, especially in the early game. And because he's so survivable. So what exactly is this kit that he uses? Well, basically his abilities revolve around his passive called Mark of the Storm, which every time you use an ability on someone, it puts a one extra stack on, and once it gets to, I believe, 3, possibly 4 stacks, then the enemy gets stunned. So his Q, and generally I refer to abilities, by the way, as Q, W, E, R. People rarely use the actual proper names, so you just say like Kennen Q, or, R, E, R, or whatever, or R, E, L, T. Instead of the ability names. So Kennen Q is where he throws a shuriken, and whoever he hits takes some damage and gets a Mark of the Storm proc, and proc is actually I have no idea where proc came from. Basically, what it means is just activates, so like one more Mark of the Storm on him, one more stack. So that's his Q. His W passively makes him put Marks of the Storm every couple abilities onto whatever enemy he hits. And when it's activated, it lets him shoot lightning at anyone who's already has a Mark of the Storm on them, which deals some extra damage and stacks another one. And then finally, then his E lets him, it's called like Lightning Rush or something. It lets him move super, super quickly, turns into a ball of lightning, and he puts Marks of the Storm on anyone he touches, one each. So then finally his ultimate is a big AoE that like Storm that applies a ton of Marks of the Storm and lets him get W's off on all of them and basically just CC a ton of people. So basically what you want to do with Kennen in lane is try and harass with your ranged Q and auto attacks, in your W, and eventually get enough stuns you can all in with your E and your ultimate ability, and just stun them and kill them. In team fights, basically, as an AP carry, his goal is to use his ultimate on as many enemies as possible to get them locked up for as long as possible, to deal a bunch of damage and get everyone else to deal a bunch of damage. As an AD carry, which is not what he is in this game, his goal is to sit back and use his abilities to keep everyone off of him. All right. So what we're going to be looking for in Kennen in this match is for him to do some really solid AoE damage and stunning in team fights for us to get kills, for everyone else to deal damage. Like he's sort of an enabler. Next we have Katarina. The top of Katarina's name is cut off because I'm terrible, terrible at making presentations, but that's okay. So Katarina is usually played mid or top as an AP carry. Sometimes a little more bruisery, which means tankier, in the top lane. And she's a highly mobile assassin who relies on getting resets from her abilities. So her kit revolves around her jumping around, dealing damage, and when she gets kills, her passive ability resets her cooldown timer somewhat, so she can use all her abilities over and over again. So if she starts getting kills, it's difficult to make her stop. So first, her Q is a ranged bouncing blade that deals some damage and leaves a little mark on the people it hits. So then her W is an AoE damage right around her that makes the marks, that activates the marks that the Q leaves and deals more damage as well. Her E lets her jump to an enemy or ally or ward, which makes her very mobile. And then finally her ultimate is her just spinning around throwing a ton of daggers at everyone nearby, which deals just a shit ton of damage. But she can be stunned and made to have it stop. So if you like stun her in the middle of her ultimate, then it'll stop going off. So you generally want to save CC for Katarina's ultimate, or else you are just going to die. So generally in lane, what she'll do, what you'll see her do, is use a Q, then jump in with E and W, or just walk up, use a Q, W, jump out with E, and then eventually, once the enemy's low enough, use her E and abilities, and then ultimate. So in team fights, basically what she's going to want to do is just get off her ultimate. If she can get off a full channel of her ultimate, then the enemy team will be low enough that she can just jump around finishing people off, and generally you'll win the team fight. If she gets interrupted really early, then or she doesn't get any people in it, then she's not going to have that much influence in the team fight, or at least not nearly as much as she could if she doesn't start getting those resets. So that's Katarina. Next is Quinn, who's a kind of unusual AD carry. She's highly mobile and very, very good at dueling. Like other AD carries such as Vayne, she can also be played top as both a bruiser or a carry, and as her ability she can turn into a bird, kind of like Zelda and Sheik in Super Smash Bros. So her Q ability shoots out Valor, the bird, is Quinn and Valor, a little team, and blinds her opponents and deals some damage. Her W reveals the area around her and passively grants her attack speed. Then her E makes her jump to a target and then vault away, like vault back, and put her passive on it. Now, what her passive is called Harrier, I think, and it makes a little target, like a crosshairs, on whoever it's targeting, and if she shoots them when they have the crosshairs on them, they do take a ton more damage. So that just comes up randomly sometimes. Whenever you use your E on someone, it also comes up. So she can get a lot of damage out that way and stay very nimble. Then her R, her ultimate ability, turns her into a bird, turns her into Valor, who is super, super fast, has a very high attack speed, and has different abilities. So on his Q, he has a melee attack that deals a ton of damage. On his W, he can activate it to gain lots and lots of attack speed, and on his E, he jumps to people and deals some damage. And then finally, when he wants to turn back from Quinn into Valor, or no, back from Valor into Quinn, he does an AoE execute, so he does AoE damage that deals more damage based on how loaded people are in the area of effect. So, Quinn is... So I said earlier that Quinn is kind of rare or unpopular, and part of that reason is because her ability, her ultimate, turns her into a bird that has to go in melee range. So while it is very good for dueling because it gives her so much attack speed and damage, and it's good for taking down turrets and split pushes, because once again it just deals so much damage so quickly, it also means that she has to make herself very vulnerable because she's going into melee range of the enemy team, which is something that AD carries very rarely want to do. So that means that unless you're very, very good at deciding when to turn into a bird and when not to, you're going to have a lot of trouble playing Valor. So that's why she's not that popular of a hero. But she definitely does have her role, and we'll see how she turns out this game. Alright, and then finally on my team is Leona, who is a highly, highly aggressive support. She relies on shooting out this thing called a Zenith Blade that hits an enemy, moves her to it, and stuns them. Then she has another stun on her Q. She's a W that explodes and deals damage and gives her more magic resistant armor. And her E is the Zenith Blade that I already talked about that shoots her into an enemy. And then finally, her ultimate is called something definitely, but it's a long range AoE like solar flare kind of that comes down and hits. It's like an orbital cannon that just deals a decent bit of damage and does an AoE stun and slow if you're on the outside of it. So basically, in lane, what she wants to do is threaten to all in. So a lot of her power in lane isn't actually like just constantly attacking people. Instead, it's the threat of her jumping on you, unloading all of her burst, having Quinn unload all of her burst, and so on and so forth. So what she wants to do is wait for like the prime moment to strike, like maybe when a jungler's ganking or when someone's out of position in lane, and kill them. In team fights, she wants to do 3 things. First, if there's someone on the enemy team who's very fed, she wants to use her abilities on them. Second, if her carry is very fed, then she wants to use her abilities to protect them. And third, she wants to get off her AoE ultimate on as many people as possible. And in this game in particular, she's going to want to stack her AoE ultimate on top of Katarina and Kennen's AoE, so they can get just a ton of stun and a ton of damage. Stun with CC, I guess, and a ton of damage and protect for Quinn. But we'll see how it goes in practice. Then finally, there's the enemy team. Very briefly, first there's Jinx, who's an AD carry. She has decent CC. She can throw down a line of little traps, and her big thing is that she can switch between a long-range splash damage attack and a shorter range but higher DPS attack. Fiddlesticks is a jungler where he relies on heavy ganking or a support where he relies on heavy CC. So basically, his kit revolves around a very powerful AoE ultimate that lets him like blink and then deal a ton of AoE damage around him. Then he has a fear that CCs the other person, has them wander around for up to 3 seconds on rank 5, a life drain on his W, and a silence on his E. So he comes in with a lot of CC. He's very squishy, but if he can just blow you up in his first round of CC or get a ton of damage into your team, you're pretty much dead. Next, there's Nidalee, who is generally a top or a mid laner, and much like Quinn, she can change forms. She can turn into a cat for melee combat, and she's generally built as a bruiser, tankier, and generally goes top. Or she can throw her spears, which means she's an ability power carry, and scales off ability power and deals a ton of poke damage as a human. I think in this game she was a mid laner. Next, there's... oh no, maybe she was a top laner, my bad. Next, there's Lysandra, who is generally a mid laner, sometimes a top laner, who's highly mobile. She has an ability called Glacial Path on her E that lets her, she can throw it out, and it's a slow-moving projectile that she can then teleport to. This is similar to Puck's ability, if you're familiar with Dota. And it's good for jukes, like she walks one way, shoots her projectile the other way, then you have to choose between following her walking or following the projectile and hope you choose the right one. And she deals very strong sustained damage at a close range with decent burst. And most of it's at least slightly AoE. I think all of it's AoE, actually. Area of effect. Finally, there's Lee Sin, who is generally a jungler or a top laner. He is just a stupidly mobile character with high base damage. So he can, on his Q, he can jump to people and deal damage. On his W, he can jump to allies or wards and give them a little shield. And on his E, slows people down. And finally his R, which is called Dragon Kick, kicks back an enemy and knocks up all the other allies who get caught in the way. So he's very good. He's very mobile, very strong ganks, and generally a very strong duelist with a very high skill cap, so a lot of people will play him poorly. But let's just briefly recap. For all of these, if you want to go to any specific slide, just click on the champion spotlight and it'll give you a description of what the champions do in more detail and how they should be built, that kind of thing. If you want champion spotlights for these characters on the enemy team, just Google champion spotlight blank or put it into YouTube and you'll be able to find it. I briefly just took that out of full screen, but what can you do? Alright, so thanks a lot for watching and see you in the episode 2 proper.